Good day, everyone. We are the Group 7, and we're going to discuss gender and ethics. Gender and ethics is the female perspective of moral issues has been ignored in favor of a male perspective. It is an ethical platform that looks at the life of men, women, and intersex in a holistic way. It seeks participation, decision-making, and changes in perspectives of human in terms of eradicating inequality, injustice, stereotypes, and ignorance. Female genital mutilation, or FGM, is one of the most notorious examples of systematic mistreatment of women. It is a procedure that involves removing parts of a young girl's genitals. The point is to reduce a girl's sexual drive to increase the likelihood that she will remain a virgin until marriage and stay faithful to her husband after that. According to estimates by Amnesty, there are 130 million women around the world today have gone through this procedure. FGM real story comes from a 6-year-old girl named Nafiasa from Africa. Nafiasa's story highlights the horrendous social injustices to women that have occurred throughout much of human history. Men have not only made the moral rules of society, but they have done so in such a way that the female perspective of moral issues has been ignored in favor of a male perspective. Based on the story of Nafiasa, a British philosopher, Alison Jaggar, describes 5 ways in which traditional ethical theory has a harmful male bias. First, it relegates to women subservient obligations, obedience, silence, and faithfulness. Second, confines women to socially isolated domestic realm of society with little legitimate political regulation. Third, it denies the moral agency of women, claiming they lack the capacity for moral reasoning. Fourth, preference for masculine values over female ones, including independence, autonomy, intellect versus interdependence, community, connection, sharing, and emotion. Fifth, prefers male notions of moral rules, judgments about particular actions, impartial moral assessments, and contractual agreements. 2 fundamental questions. First, how do men and women psychologically differ from each other? Second, how do men and women morally differ from each other? Discussions of gender and morality began in ancient Greece, beginning with Aristotle. Woman and natural subservience. Rousseau, woman as object of sexual drive. Wollstonecraft, gender to neutral morality. And the last one, instinct versus social construction. Aristotle, woman and natural subservience. Based on the question above, Aristotle argues that men are psychologically designed to command and women to obey. Women are the followers, the deliberative faculty without authority. The slave has no deliberative faculty at all, and the children is an immature deliberative faculty. Aristotle is not saying that women are slaves or children, but rather that they fill a subordinate role within the family, parallel to the way that slaves and children do. Women do have the ability to make deliberative choices but lack a natural authority behind what they decide. It is only men who make deliberative choices with leadership and authority, and only when they are adults and not naturally servile slaves. On the question above, Aristotle says that women have subservient virtues, different virtues for different capacities of the soul. Men are temperance and good in commanding, while women are temperance and courage in obeying. A man would be thought a coward if he had no more courage than a courageous woman, and a woman would be thought overly talkative if she imposed no more restraint on her conversation than the good men. Now let's proceed to Rousseau, Women as Objects of Sexual Drive. Based on the psychological question above, Rousseau argues that men are strong and aggressive, while women are weak, passive, and offer little resistance. Rousseau says that it is his strength that attracts her to him, and it is her allurement that attracts him to her. On the moral question above, Rousseau says that woman should learn to entice men. He thus depends on her cooperation to satisfy his sexual desires, and she is willing to submit to his superior strength when she gets what she wants from him. Women need to be educated differently to bring out these natural differences so that they can more effectively entice men through their beauty and charm. Wollstonecraft, Gender to Neutral Morality. On the question above, Wollstonecraft argues that women are by nature physically weaker than men, but men have exploited this weakness and have imposed on women the status of fleeting objects of sexual desire, and women have fallen right into the trap. Men and women are in fact fundamentally the same. It doesn't appear the way. That's because of the gender roles that have been imposed on them. On the moral question above, Wollstonecraft argues that men and women are fundamentally the same, morally as they are psychologically. The moral status of all human is governed by three capacities which distinguish us from animals, namely, reason, the exercise of virtue, and the passion for knowledge. Women should have the freedom to develop the rational virtues of truthfulness, justice, and humanity, which were traditionally more associated with men. Instinct versus social construction. Wollstonecraft criticism, her basis for denying psychological gender differences was based on her own experience as a woman. But some psychological differences are so string that they may form foundations for gender differences in ethics. Wollstonecraft insisted on both educational and vocational equality for women, envisioning a time when women could work as physicians, entrepreneurs, and in other areas traditionally reserved for men. Female care ethics. Morality, from a female perspective, focuses on caring for each others. The male perspective focuses on rule following and abstract moral duties. Kohlberg and Gilligan, Justice versus Care. Kohlberg's theory, from childhood on through adulthood, people progress in their moral thinking, moving through 6 different stages which move from selfishness to impartial justice. Gilligan's theory, a woman's moral point of view is different from a man. Men are typically emphasize rights and principle of justice, while women are typically focused on particular relationships. Men tend to resolve ethical problems in terms of rules and principles, while women tend to resolve ethical problems in terms of maintaining important relationships.
Care and particularism. Gilligan is one of many contemporary theorists who see care as the central component of female ethics. Their specific theories often differ, sometimes dramatically, but there are several component themes surrounding an ethics of care. First is that women see their personal identity as deeply interconnected with other people. 2. Women focus on specific circumstances surrounding moral situations. Third, women see morality in the context of close personal relationship. And the last one is that women see morality as a function of vulnerability and dependency. With each of these 4 factors, the difference between the traditional and female approaches to morality may be only a matter of degree. But these are not at the center of the traditional concept of morality in the way that they are for women. For care ethics then, it's precisely this particular relation, not the abstract universal principle, that generate our ethics. This is called moral particularism. It states that morality always involves particular relations with particular people, not lifeless abstractions. Care ethics rejects traditional universalist ethics, the idea that ethics consists in universal moral principle applicable to all people at all times. Instead, they argue that universalism is too abstract to justify our special obligations to family and community. Classical and moral theory incorporates some particularism by recognizing obligations to family, friends, and local community. Morality flourishes in concrete relationships that give meanings and purposes to our lives. We misconstrue the subject when we transform it into the abstract, bloodless universal principles of the core morality. Care and virtues. As we've seen, a dominant feature of care ethics is its mistrust of general moral principles that supposedly govern every morally relevant actions. For this reason, many defenders of care ethics argue that care should be seen as a component of virtue theory, where care is a nurturing character trait that we personally internalize as we do other virtues. This view was championed by American philosopher of education Nell Noddings that care ethics is a quest for new virtues based on traditional women's practices, even when these female practices themselves become abandoned within modern theory. Traditional rule-governed morality is a hostile environment to an ethics of care based on her. But American philosopher Sarah Clare Miller disagrees and argues instead that care is fully compatible with general moral principles. The resistance that care ethic has to principles stems from a mistaken view of the role that general principle of moral duty and rights actually play within the moral theory. We also need to evaluate the role principle might play in any given moral situation by taking note of the relevant details of that situation, which is to say, by paying close attention to the context surrounding the moral situation and the particular features of the individual involved. The need is so great that it creates a moral urgency which is the best expressed as a general duty to care. 4 options regarding gender and ethics. Now, Let us discuss this male-only option, that this is the first option, that is only the traditional so-called male view of ethics is valid, that emphasize general abstract principles and both men and women should adopt it. Furthermore, throughout history, traditional ethics has always included values that are very similar to the care values such as charity, benevolence, civility, hospitality, and responsibility towards one's children and parents. Wollstonecraft was right. Morality is gender neutral, and it's just a matter of giving women access to the traditional value system that's already in place. Yes, it is true that in their best moments traditional ethics ethicists have formulated moral principles that apply universally to men and women alike. But it is also true that traditional morality has always been tied to human psychology or physiology. There are emotions, drives, and natural inclination that spark specific behaviors, and there are special feelings like compassion and sympathy that inform our moral judgments. Thus, the traditional male-only approaches to ethics seems incomplete. The second option is that only the female approach to morality is valid, and both men and women should adopt it. Ethics is a female in character, and men and women alike should adopt it in its female form. Just as women have the capacity to work in male-oriented fields like engineering, men too have the capacity to assimilate a female approach to ethics, and when it gains universal acceptance, there may no longer be a need to refer it as a female morality any more than we refer for education, social work, or counseling a female disciplines. The main problem with this female-only approach is that its concept of ethics is just as incomplete as the male-only approach. If it is wrong for traditional male ethical approaches to veto the female voice, then it is equally wrong for female ethical approaches to veto the male voice. An important part of the human thought process is to make abstraction and general rules about our life experiences. It's the foundation of all sciences, and it's at the heart of our efforts to make sense of the world surrounds us. Separate but equal options. The third option is that there are two equally valid domains of ethics grounded in gender differences, where men should emphasize the male approach and women the female approach. Roy Baumeister states that women prefer one-to-one relationships which are critical to our immediate survival, and men prefer larger groups which develop social systems and culture. Since these two approaches to morality are tied directly to psychological gender differences, how men and women are by nature sociable, it makes sense for men to emphasize the traditional ethical approach and women the care approach. Their ethical approaches are separate but equal. However, the separate but equal option quickly falls apart. Right off, the psychological study shows only that the men are more motivated towards group interaction and women are motivated towards intimate relationships. Both genders clearly have the capacity for both types of social interaction, and as Baumeister himself says, it's more a matter of what interests men and women respectively. Furthermore, if the separate but equal option were instituted, it could have disastrous consequences for women. We must reject then and separate but equal option regarding gender and morality. Mutually inclusive option. The final option is that men and women should adopt both the male and the female approaches to morality. As we observe above the three options, we've seen that there are just grounds for both, including the female perspective in ethics and for retaining the traditional male approaches that stresses general rules. We've also seen that we cannot segregate these two approaches, assigning the one to women and the other to men. Rather, a mutually inclusive approach is needed where men and women internalize both tendencies. Many of our typical moral obligations are already uncomfortable to us, particularly when they conflict with our selfish inclinations, such as treating people respectfully even when we do not like them, or respecting other people's property rights when they have something that we want, or telling the truth even it's to our advantage, but the morally responsible person fulfill those obligations anyway. As a conclusion of our topic, gender and ethics, we've seen the traditional ethical theory has done a poor job of representing women's moral viewpoint. We've concluded that the best way of resolving tensions between the gender-related differences in ethics is for men and women to adopt both the male and female approaches to morality. Perhaps something like this: treat others as friends in need without violating principles of justice. By treating others as a friend in need, we incorporate the female care value and its emphasis on particularization. By not violating principles of justice, we are acknowledging the validity and constraints of the traditional rules of morality. It's one thing to develop a special relationship with others, but it's entirely different if it turns into nepotism, favoritism, partialism, and other types of unfairness. A balance is needed between close relationships and impartiality. Otherwise, caring could develop into tribalism or a good old boys club where we become overly loyal with the caring friendships that we cultivate. Hope you learned something from our topic, gender and ethics. This is Fitz Gyrogapantus and Dobelin P. Hilig reporting. God bless and stay healthy, everyone!